Day, dobar dan, mirdita, dobri den, I don't know in any other languages, but it's nice to see you back. Thank you for being almost on time. This panel is focusing on surveillance and censorship and who controls the digital space in this case, considering my panelists and guests here, it's in the Western Balkans and Turkey. And I'm going to start all the way from the right side with introduction. From Montenegro, we have Irina Stamatović, who is intervention manager with organization called HELP, which has also a German part of the German name, which I cannot pronounce correctly, but Irina will do that. Next to her, we have Ceren Unal, who is a chair at the Internet Society in Turkey. Next to her is Milica, Tošić, attorney at law, and she's working with Partner Serbia. And next to me is Sara Kelmendi, researcher and with Institute for Democracy and Mediation in Albania. And my name is Azem Kurtić. I am Bosnia and Herzegovina correspondent at Balkan Insight, which is BIRN's English website. Earlier this year, we have been talking a lot yesterday and today, we have been talking a lot about digital rights violations, and the report that we published, Maggie and the team have done an amazing job in actually mapping and analyzing all the digital violations that we have came across in the past year. But we have published another report which is called Surveillance and Censorship in the Western Balkans, which is focusing basically on the topics which we are going to cover today. You might heard some things which are overlapping, but I hope you're going to bring new details. And I'm going to start with Milica, considering the situation in Serbia and student protests and everything that has been going on since November last year. There has been a lot of instances where activists and journalists have been targeted with different spyware or different cyber attacks, including two of BIRN journalists from BIRN Serbia who have received messages from unknown numbers, and after analyzing those messages and the file with Amnesty International Lab, we realized that basically it was an attempt to install the Pegasus spyware on their phones. How do they do it, Milica? Yeah, the state should be protecting us, but in the end the state kind of seems to be spying us.
Is this on? Yes, okay. So when we talk about spyware in Serbia, we are no longer in the field of speculation. Multiple investigations, you mentioned some of them, by international organizations and also domestic, show that our authorities have procured and deployed several types of commercial spyware, including Pegasus, but also one domestically made called Novi Spy, and also several forensic tools from companies like Celebrite that are used to unlock devices and prepare them for infection. And if we look at the cases that we know of, mainly presented in Amnesty International's report Digital Prison, but also many amazing BIRN articles, we can clearly see a pattern. So the police and security services are using these tools to infect phones of journalists, activists, even NGO representatives. From a legal point of view, this means serious violations of multiple laws. I don't want to bore you with specific provisions, but in Serbia, police and secret services must follow a strict procedure when conducting secret surveillance measures. For example, they need to have a prior court order. This surveillance needs to be justified and as specific as possible. It needs to be limited in time and scope, and it must be necessary and proportionate. If we look at the cases we know of and the ones you mentioned, none of this was respected. And there is also an additional question that stands out. If we look at the technical capabilities of spyware, the fact that it turns device into a 24/7 surveillance tool, can its use ever truly be legal, necessary, and proportionate? There is actually a very important aspect of reaction of the state to what's going on with this. The state is either encouraging this or ignoring these cases. Shortly after Amnesty International's report was published, several Serbian NGOs, including Partner Serbia, initiated multiple procedures before competent institutions. Some of them refused to act within their mandate. Some did formally open inquiries, but here we are almost a year later with no tangible outcome. I think that that in itself shows that our country is not ready to control these tools in a democratic way. So when we talk about procurement and wide use of these tools, we are really talking here about deliberate choice to invest citizens' money and even some international donor funds to buy these dangerous tools that are then turned against citizens, journalists, activists, and even now students. So combined with the physical violence that we are seeing on the streets and all other digital threats that we talked about yesterday and today, spyware becomes another very, very serious layer of repression. It's pushing people towards self-censorship and making civic engagement feel increasingly dangerous.
You mentioned the use of public money to procure different equipment and different tools and softwares to monitor the citizens that are paying that basically illegally. I'm going to go to Sara now, and another thing which we actually pointed out in our report is that a procurement of the cameras in public spaces by the Albanian government, and usually the municipalities are those who are carrying those kind of activities. What do we know about how many cameras, who's watching, who has the access to the materials, and what's the situation in Albania when it comes to those looking eyes around us?
Is this on? Okay. Well, thank you for your question. In fact, in Albania there is some sort of tension between alignment and practical readiness when it comes to digital surveillance, and this also mirrors the broader dynamics in Albania's digital governance. Surveillance tools are advancing rapidly. We have drones, CCTV, automatic number plate recognition going on. And at the municipal level, surveillance infrastructures are also expanding. Cameras are now placed in streets, schools, and kindergartens, and Tirana saw even in 2019 live trafficking camera feeds being published openly online, which just goes to show just how easily systems intended for safety can also slip into uncontrolled tracking. On top of all this infrastructure of surveillance, there is the Smart City surveillance project, which is the most ambitious attempt so far to knit all these systems together. It foresees thousands of fixed cameras across 20 cities and key tourist areas in Albania, all tied into a 24-hour monitoring system that can also detect traffic incidents automatically and feed violation notices to citizens via e-Albania, e-government platform. So on the surface, it's all about safer roads and fewer police on street corners. However, the contracts are very vague. Freedom of information requests that we have sent to national authorities have gone unanswered. And it is particularly concerning because in the past, Albania has experienced some massive data leaks where voting preferences, salary data, vehicle plate records, they were all public, and
salaries
as well, yeah. And this shows just how vulnerable personal data is once it enters state systems, especially when those state systems are deeply fragmented. And meanwhile, also private sector profiling has also accelerated in Albania. Companies have started to collect far more data than service delivery requires. And advanced analytics also allow for inference of political views, sexual orientation, health status, and religious beliefs. Big platforms such as Meta, Google, TikTok also operate without any clear local regulation. However, the government has pushed them to act on issues like image-based abuse, hate speech, and human smuggling in some cases, but little is known about how these interactions actually work. And transparency around platform compliance in Albania remains extremely limited, and content moderation relies mostly on global standards that often fail to capture local nuance. We also have formally institutions like oversight institutions like the Information and Data Protection Commissioner or the Commissioner for Protection from Discrimination and the Ombudsperson, who are supposed to be the checks and balances here. And there are important examples where they've pushed back, actually. The IDP Commissioner has intervened about disproportionate workplace surveillance and fined institutions with very modest fines, to be frank. After the data leaks, the Ombudsperson, on the other hand, has successfully challenged some legal amendments that would have expanded police surveillance without judicial oversight. But they still remain very under-resourced. Their recommendations are often ignored, and public trust in their effectiveness is limited. So overall, Albania stands in a place where formal legal alignment is accelerating, but practical protections remain very fragile at the moment.
Thank you, Sara. So everything we're talking about here today, you can find at Balkan Insight if you just use keywords and add Balkan Insight in your searches, and you will find more details about these cases and more information. For example, one of the investigations from Montenegro that we published has shown that Montenegro has also procured biometric surveillance cameras, but without a legal ground to do so. So Irina, how did that develop after we published the investigation, and what did happen actually there?
Yeah, so thanks everyone. I would, before answering your question, I would like to answer a more pressing issue, because that's a buzzword for many of the things. And usually when discussing digital rights and freedoms, we are often faced with that there are some more pressing issues in any other field, and many of the cases, especially in Montenegro, remain unresolved or nobody gets held accountable at the end of the processes. And that is why I wanted to start the answer from the title of the panel, who holds digital space and surveillance, and welcome to the Big Brother panel. So the Big Brother in Montenegro, in this case, the MUP, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, purchased from an Israeli company, Anyvision, the surveillance cameras, and they installed it in Podgorica, Budva, and Bar, the three cities in Montenegro. And well, one of the most interesting pinpoints, and I would like to paint a picture out of this in order for you to get how it functions in a state that has less than 1 million in population, that only 5 of 563 cameras were actually used for biometrics, but the rest were not. So like they were not used for those purposes. And that, besides my sarcasm and irony, it's a horrific thing. And we're usually faced with the consequences of certain actions rather than being part of the processes or stopping them. The fact that those, okay, were deinstalled and everything is one thing, but the other is I cannot surely say that there are no cameras around my hometown that are not actually doing that. Now, this is why the role of these kind of investigation plays a great place in just being aware of what's going on around us, but also what our previous panelists in the previous panel said, the fact that there is a law means nothing up until a certain point it is being executed or breached. In this case, the Montenegro has not adopted, for the purposes of the talk, has not adopted the GDPR. There is certain changes going with the national legislation in that regard, but there is a law that should protect the personal data and protect the citizens. My idea behind my legal logics is that it does not go to a certain extent. Unlike my logics, the logics of our public officials is just like, but it's just a bit of surveillance. So the Big Brother is ridiculous, not funny, not funny at all. This is a response, but it's a reality. Those cases are unraveling up to a certain point where we have a more pressing issue. And there are constantly more and more pressing issues. And I'll just wrap this with saying that sometimes when I see some more pressing issues being part of the public sphere, sometimes I ask myself, what are we being dragged from into these new news that are upcoming?
Thank you, Milica. Speaking of all of these things, it kind of look like we are all sharing similar experiences where the governments are procuring equipments or procuring the tools and don't have the legal basis to do it, or they find the legal loopholes actually to do it and implement those things. Earlier this year, speaking of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we had a situation, or the news broke that Republika Srpska, which is one of two entities in Bosnia and Herzegovina, is planning to implement internet control, basically. What they are doing is that they are using Israeli expertise in creating the softwares. They are using Chinese technology to create basically 15 points around Bosnia and Herzegovina, which will be, all the internet traffic would go through those points. And they're using Russian filters. The idea is to use Russian filters in filtering the content, and as they explained it, is that the aim is to protect the youngest one, to protect the children using internet so they are not exposed to predators, pedophiles, and harmful content in general. That activated a lot of fears and speculation in Bosnia and Herzegovina about controls of the internet space, and I think the fears are kind of correct because we have example of the Turkey, which has implemented a series of laws and controls that actually tackle the issue of internet space. We have heard some of them about some of them in the past 2 days, but from your perspective, what has changed in the past 2 years that made us so scared that might happen to us as well?
Yeah, it's like, I know you said recent, but it's like I've been involved in this longer than I'd like to admit. So it's like, if you bear with me, I'd like to take you to a short walk of memory lane. And so it all started in 2007. And I was a wide-eyed research assistant in a university. And I was like, oh yeah, Turkey is going to harmonize its laws with the EU. And we are like super enthusiastic about our EU candidacy, which is still on, technically. And then, as I was following the debates about harmonizing the e-commerce directive at the time, which basically controls intermediary liability, and that was one of the first legislation like worldwide that control digital space. And as they had quite a nice draft, suddenly we had high-profile cases of child pornography and online fraud. And with wide popular support of the opposition also, we had this draft law called 5651, that's how we call it, like the prevention of crimes on cyberspace. And that law is still in order. And so it basically, it had some parts of it, tried to harmonize the e-commerce directive. So we had content access and host providers and basic liability issues. It had a kind of a decent notice and take down procedure. But then blocking access was so simple, nobody resorted to notice and take down anymore. And then over time, whoever asks me about like the recent political history of Turkey, I always say, go have a look at this law, it has translations, and if you check the amendments, you'll see that there was a response to everything, every political milestone, such as like the Gezi protests and the leaks of alleged, I still want to go back into the country, alleged corruption tapes that we had. So after every incident, we had more and more restrictions, and everybody has been complaining about this. The silver lining, since 2007, now Turkish people gained this super digital literacy skills. So now everybody knows how to use the VPN very early on. So I'd like to see, I'm a hopeless optimist, so I'd like to see these silver linings. And of course, in the recent years, especially after the coup attempt, that I think in the region, it's like the Gülen's coup attempt that we had, that sparked the level of authoritarianism to a new level that we never thought would be possible. And that was followed by more restrictions, and in 2020, again in an attempt to harmonize with the DSA, because that was the time where the platforms took power. So there are slightly resembling provisions, but quite heavy sanctions, including bandwidth throttling in certain circumstances. So the platforms shift to over-compliance, and after that we had a hybrid censorship regime. And also in between, they established this access providers union. So if you want to operate as an access provider in Turkey, you need to join this union and also pay a significant fee. And you have to instantly implement all blocking orders. So after this union was established, we no longer, it wasn't very transparent in the first place, and we had rule of law discussions because this was one of the very first examples of an administrative authority restricting access, which should be a power of the judiciary. So that was already debatable, and then with this union we had zero transparency because nobody knows on which level access is being blocked right now. And now they're using more sophisticated tools, and again in between, Orhan Şener also mentioned this, the Radio Television Broadcasting Authority has now powers to control some of the, especially the big YouTube channels by independent journalists. And they are not shy to use these powers. So we are seeing that too. So we have this layered approach of censorship and control. And then came, conveniently right before the elections, we had a disinformation law. This also introduced a new provision in our criminal code as well. Very vague, so misleading information with a weird form of formulated criminal intent that nobody knows what it is. And so not only laws are being weaponized, the judiciary and the interpretation of laws are, of course, being weaponized here. So we have now a measurable rise in self-censorship, which I believe is worse than censorship itself. And we've been seeing this. And now very recently, just this year, we have a new cybersecurity law, which again, resembling an harmonization attempt to the NIS2 directive. And it has this provision of disinformation related to cybersecurity events. So if there is a leak, and as a reporter, if you report it, and the government denies it, of course, who is going to define truth is another question that deserves another debate, probably. And so you might as well be sentenced to prison for 2 to 5 years. So a new level of censorship is now entering into force. So we have these operational consequences we are really seeing this, as your report also shows, shrinking in civic space. People are scared. We have full central authorization, and we have a full centralization of the regulatory authority of information communication technologies. And the rise of self-censorship, and we have this increasing alignment between state priorities and platform behavior. So at the very beginning, if I have 1 minute left, and I'd like to address the big elephant in the room and say we are not living in, we are now in a different era, because in the beginning of the early internet days, still we thought democracy, the rule of law, freedoms in general, and a liberal order in general was a prerequisite for economic growth. This is no longer the case. So even the governments that we have seen, like bastions of democracy, are no longer prioritizing this anymore. So the Turkey's journey might be seen as a good practice or worse practice, depending on from where you're looking at. But I think we learned lessons, and I'm coming from the future. It's not very good, but yes, there's still hope.
The future looks worrying, to be honest. Speaking of internet and the laws implemented in Milica, I'm not aware that Serbia is controlling that much of the internet space with similar laws and procedures. But since the student protests have started, we all know it's a known fact that the regime controls media and how they report on. But we have seen a lot of cases where the students have been exposed to online smearing campaigns in an attempt to change the narrative over social media about the protest and what's going on. What can you tell us? What were some of the worst cases that happened to the students, and what kind of consequences actually that leaves on the society and on them personally?
Well, students and activists are facing many problems today, but since we are only focusing on the digital sphere now, I will put aside being beaten up in the streets and faculties by the police and criminals pretending to be the police, and also being randomly arrested and prosecuted. In the digital sphere, they are receiving threats, usually anonymous, through bot accounts. Their personal data is being leaked from the databases that are supposed to be secure and confidential, but institutions also sometimes intentionally, illegally publish their personal information. And this digital aspect is very important because since the beginning of the protests, students have been using social media as the main channel of communication. Almost all blocked faculties have profiles on various social platforms, and around 10 days ago they announced that they are rapidly gaining followers, which were usually bot and phantom accounts, which is why they suspected that it is some kind of a sabotage, and they were right. Like last week, shortly after they announced that, several profiles of blocked faculties on Instagram and TikTok have been shut down. But there is also one example from December 2024. Beer in Serbia has an amazing article about this. So it happened in Belgrade when our president was organizing a large pro-government event in Sava Center. One of the attendees was a student protester who came with a friend to see what's going on there. They entered the venue together, but when the student stepped aside to buy a drink, he was surrounded by men in black, who escorted him out without explanation. They took him to a police station where his phone was confiscated at the entrance. They held him in for quite some time, and in the meantime, his family, friends, and fellow activists had no idea what happened to him, where he was. And social media was actually flooded with posts seeking information about him. His parents tried to report him missing, but the police refused to do anything and also refused to confirm that they are the ones holding him. Inside, he was questioned by 4 inspectors. They interrogated him, they threatened him, they forced him to sign some documents without being able to read them. And when he refused, they grew more aggressive. And eventually, after 6 hours of holding him illegally without charges, they decided to let him go. And they gave him his phone back, but not in the same condition. Amnesty International Forensics later confirmed that while he was being held inside, the police had also illegally installed spyware in his device.
Thank you, Milica. Sara, we're going to stay close to media and what happens to journalists, activists in online space. In the report on surveillance and censorship in Western Balkans that you worked on, and in the part on Albania, you guys dedicated the part which actually speaks about online smearing campaigns. And one, I would say, shocking example to me was the Citizens channel Albania, which is led by a group of young journalists. If you don't know them and about them, take a look. They are amazing and doing an amazing job. But they had a lot of content removed from their pages, if I can remember correctly. And besides them, there was quite a few other examples of such campaigns and attacks on journalists and activists.
Indeed. The regional report on surveillance and censorship in the Western Balkans addresses the case study of the Citizens channel in Albania, as well as Media Look, another organization, which were hit pretty hard during 2023-2024. There have also been some more recent cases this year, which are reflected in the regional report that was launched yesterday. But Citizens Channel attack was quite unique. It faced a multi-layered assault. So not only were their social media accounts targeted, but also their website. They were first hit by a DDoS attack, then by a sophisticated in-path alteration that injected malicious scripts, and it redirected users to inappropriate or harmful pages. They started migrating the website to a new domain, but still the attacks persisted, damaging also their archive and basically erasing all of their content. Simultaneously, they were hit on social media with a wave of coordinated reports which targeted hundreds of their posts, especially those who addressed public interest issues like urban construction projects, environmental concerns, and other community resistance movements, because Citizens Channel actually gained a lot of popularity in Albania, especially during the COVID pandemic, because they were the only independent media that were broadcasting protests. And simultaneously on Instagram, they had some bot networks which inflated their follower count overnight, and which is a tactic that can trigger automated platform penalties. And Meta's initial responses on their reports were automated and very unhelpful to them, and only after civil rights defenders intervened on this case, using an informal mechanism with Meta's human rights team, was some of the content restored. Then there was another case by MediaLook, another news platform in Albania, which followed a similar pattern. So both social media accounts as well as websites were hit after publishing material that was critical of municipal influence over local media and organizing some roundtables on propaganda and disinformation. MediaLook's website was subjected to DDoS attacks originating from foreign IPs, although such origins are often deliberately masked, so we can't say for sure. The attacks caused some site crashes, redirections, and severe disruptions, just like in the case of Citizens Channel. Parallel to this, their Facebook page and the personal account of its director were also hit by coordinated reporting campaigns, leading to suspension, and in the director's case, there was also a notice of permanent closure without other rights of appeal. Again, resolution became possible using backup admin rights in this case and the intervention of civil rights defenders. However, MediaLook and other outlets have also responded through a solidarity campaign which publicly denounced the censorship practices in Albania. And these two cases actually expose broader structural vulnerabilities, such as limited technological capacity within the independent media, vague or ineffective platform appeal systems, the lack of Albanian language moderation expertise, which was also highlighted in several panels yesterday, and no distinct protection mechanisms for journalistic content. They also demonstrate how easily coordinated reporting, but also networks and technical attacks can silence or delay journalism. Earlier this year, we also witnessed another incident. News24, a public TV broadcaster in Albania, was forced to stop broadcasting altogether for 10 days. Authorities forcibly entered the network's offices, cut off the electricity, barred journalists, and seized equipment and sensitive files, including here the computers. And although it was framed as a property dispute between the government and the TV broadcaster, the operation actually raised some serious concerns about the way it was handled and source protection. A court later ruled that the seizures were all illegal, and nearly 200 media workers who had been affected returned back to the office.
Thank you, Sara. We will stay with media, Irina, and what we have seen in the past few years is not that just the state is surveilling journalists, activists, but also employers. One of the things that we mentioned in our surveillance and censorship report is the case of Radio Television of Montenegro, which had cameras installed in the workspace, and after the director, basically the workers were monitored during their working hours. After they started the complaint, what happened? Like, was anybody found responsible?
Actually, should we ask the audience? Come on, take a wild guess on the basis of my previous case that I showed. Let's start from actually what happened, and I want to emphasize that we're speaking about both video and audio surveillance, and we're speaking about the fact that the cameras that were both having the audio and the video surveillance that were installed were, of course, not informing the Agency of Data Protection, which is obligatory by our data protection law, and since they were installed and then after the complaints came, they were going to the Supreme Prosecutor's Office and back to the Agency of Data Protection for data protection, and after the findings that they were audio and video surveilled, the only thing that happened was that the videos and audios were deleted. And I think this is, and nobody, of course, it goes without saying that nobody was held accountable, nobody dived deeper into actually holding someone accountable or finding them guilty or whatever the logics would be in the consequence of this case. And I think even though it's one case in one working environment, it is quite indicative and can use as litmus paper to show where we are, and it can actually show us the level of trust and how it affects to the level of trust in the workplace. If we're speaking about general idea of human rights, we should remind ourselves that they come from labor rights first, and the labor rights and the being protected in your workspace while those 8, 6, sometimes 12 hours, sometimes 24 hours of work are should be and is a pre-assumption that you are and your human rights are protected. The pre-assumption that we mentioned in these 2 days are pre-assumption of that there is in countries the rule of law in order to harmonize with EU law. Those pre-assumptions fall on situations like this. The pre-assumptions that your human rights are protected and the pre-assumptions that there is a rule of law. And this is deeply problematic if we are speaking about, and this is my favorite floscle of our politicians, that we are the leaders in the region. And the Montenegro is a leader in the region in EU integration. I'm like, seriously? Good for you guys. In which Montenegro are you living? Because I've been around for like a while, and there are different realities and there are different narratives around certain things and how they are being presented, and at the end, what we trust, what we believe in, who we trust, who we believe in, and this is quite problematic. I'm not, how you said, hopeless optimist. No. I would like to have a few minutes with you after the panel to show me the way how to be the one to protect my own mental health. But no. And this is, I think, something that is highly problematic, and it illustrates the image of where we stand on that and where we stand on holding institution, people, employers accountable. Nowhere.
Thank you. We had in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we also had similar cases, and our agency for personal data protection is receiving around 10 reports every week about illegally set up video surveillance in pardon me, in different places. And one of the cases we tackled in the report was of a journalist who worked for 20-something years at a private radio station. And then when the owner of the station changed, they changed the location, and the new owner has installed video cameras, including cameras which are monitoring directly the computers, the studio, the desk, hallways. So basically everything was under the cameras. And a few years back there was an earthquake in Croatia, and when one of the journalists, they felt it also in that building. In Bosnia, it's in northern Bosnia, and when they felt it, she started running away and in panic, like to leave the building. After that, one of the colleagues from the radio station actually entered the video surveillance, so everybody had the access to that video surveillance, and he made cutouts of that situation and how people are running away because it looked funny afterwards, and he shared. When she realized what happened and what kind of data breach and that was, she decided that she is going to quit that radio station, start her own small media outlet, and that was 2021. She is still in the process of legal case with her boss because she sued them on different counts. I'm going to go to Ceren now again. It's not about surveillance, the classical ones, but lately Turkish government has created a social media platform, like in an attempt to control social media space. They also created their own social media platform, which is, and they are incentivizing people and government workers, public workers, to migrate to that platform. What do we know about back end of that?
Oh, okay. No, on the front end, it is quite problematic too. It's like, just to clarify, it's not the government, so this is still private, but guess who develops it?
Bayraktar.
Yeah, it's like Erdogan's like never a dull moment in Turkey. So Erdogan's son-in-law, who is quite a big figure in the defense industry, he has this like drone company, military drones, selling all over the world, including Ukraine and other countries. And so this is called Next Social. And yes, the government is encouraging government officials, some state agencies, and like the general public. But I recently checked the uptake. It's reported to just exceeding 1 million users. But I don't know if they're active or not. And most of these sources was pro-government, so the objectivity of the information. But still, the total number of social media users in Turkey is 58.5 million. So I think we can make an analogy with the Truth Social in the US. So it's like you really cannot force these things. And also it turned out this social media platform was using Mastodon's license without giving the open source and using the license properly. So English and Turkish versions had different information on the site. And they said, oh yeah, we're going to correct it. They didn't. And I think this is, and also these platforms usually they don't, so even if people feel obliged to be a part of this, eventually those who stay would just create echo chambers. So even if even on the huge platforms we are living in our own bubbles, and these ones really are a micro level of example. And I think this is a good opportunity to discuss how the lines between the private and the public sphere blurred. So it's like we're not talking about, so right now we're seeing a lot of state powers being delegated, like filtering, censorship. Some powers are delegated to the private actors, mostly big tech, and they feel obliged because the same governments are also, I mean in Turkey we have a draft competition law amendment, which is in line with the DMA. So of course you feel obliged to cooperate more freely with the government because the same government is going to, might impose you a fine for competition law grounds. So this is this massive conflict of interest, and we see that we are now talking about the MAGAification of big tech in the US. And so we were quite, I think, naive. We thought social media or internet is going to democratize our whole space, our whole world. It wasn't so. So I think we now have to build on this to develop new strategies to just like navigate ourselves in this drama.
I'm going to skip Milica this time and go straight to Sara. While one of the governments is trying to push people to privately own independent social media, Albanian government is banning social media. The TikTok ban, it was a hot topic in the region, in Albania, in the region, and I think in Europe, because a lot of governments are thinking on how to basically protect the children who are using TikTok, but it seems like the ban was not the best option.
Exactly. It's been 7 or 8 months since the ban, and it is clear now that the ban was both ineffective in practice and highly controversial in its intent. So the government first justified the ban, the one-year ban, as a child protection measure, as you said, and it was in response to the tragic killing of a 14-year-old late in 2024. Claiming that the conflict had started on TikTok, but TikTok itself later discovered that there was no evidence of either teenagers ever having an account and that the videos were actually from another platform. Despite this, the decision was approved in March 2025, just 2 months before the national elections in Albania, which immediately raised some questions regarding the timing and the political motivation, because opposition parties were growing fast on TikTok and building large audiences. So banning the app at that moment precisely seemed very political. The practical outcome has been very straightforward. The ban has not worked at all. VPN usage spiked overnight in Albania. Proton VPN reported about 1,200% increase in Albania at the time. Key parts of the government's narrative remain unanswered and unverified so far. The claim that 90% of the surveyed parents during a nationwide public consultation process demanded TikTok's closure has never been backed up, and no public plan has been introduced to improve online safety. Institutions also promised that they would use this 12-month window to work with TikTok on new filters, but there is no evidence on any follow-up so far. And the Ministry of Education has not offered any mitigation measures so far. Civil society organizations and journalists, on the other hand, have strongly criticized the move. Birn Albania, above all, along with other organizations, has also challenged the ban at the Constitutional Court, where a decision is still pending. The Association of Journalists of Albania argues that a ruling in their favor could also set an important precedent against politically motivated internet restrictions. And experts also point out that the ban actually contradicts EU digital policy narratives, which often rely on regulation and accountability, not platform shutdowns. But the way the ban was implemented has also created further concern in Albania. It relied on deep packet inspection technology, which is provided to us by the Israeli Cybersecurity Authority for free for 1 year. So it was a free trial. These devices are capable of very detailed traffic inspection, raising some understandable fears about expanded surveillance without clear oversight or safeguards. And of course, this all fits into the bigger picture. Albania also lacks a coherent framework for regulating digital platforms, but it also regularly pressures companies like Meta and Google to remove harmful or sensitive content. And those companies often operate global moderation systems that don't reflect the local reality in Albania, and we have very little transparency about how they interact with the Albanian authorities, because just a few months before the TikTok ban, the Albanian government had also reached an agreement with TikTok on removing harmful content. But apparently that fell out. So yeah, in sum, the TikTok's ban stated purpose is unproven, and its enforcement has been largely ineffective if any other governments are considering it. And its timing was also very politically charged. So instead of improving online safety, it just showed it just highlighted how easily digital governance in Albania can slide into restriction without transparency.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to make a small roundabout tour before I get to next question. Earlier this year, Europol, together with, when it comes to regional agency, together with police agencies from Serbia, Albania, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, has conducted the so-called Action Referral Day, when they removed more than 2,000 links pointing out to extremist and harmful content online. And the latest claim is that TikTok is among other social media platforms is being used by different terrorist different terrorist organizations and radical organizations to actually recruit young people. That has shown in the example of the, for example, terrorist attacks or attempted terrorist attacks in Europe, that more than 70% of them are now, the perpetrators are under 18, and majority of them are acting as a lone wolves. They usually claim that the radicalization of those children has been done online over TikTok or even YouTube in some cases, whose algorithm did not manage to recognize that it's a very radical content, and they kept the video online. Among other things, in Bosnia we had also last year we had a case of I think he was 13-year-old boy who walked into a police station one night, and he stabbed 2 police officers, of which one has passed away, another one was injured, and the prosecution has quickly declared that as a result of online radicalization and declared it a terrorist attack. I forgot your name again. Ceren, yes.
It's so much harder to correctly pronounce it.
Yeah, no, I keep forgetting it because Ceren, my apologies. I try to remember it again. These things happening on social media and online, you mentioned it, that one of the consequences of everything going on was that people have turned to self-censorship. What are the other consequences that it seems like?
For those who don't.
Those who don't, yeah. It seems like the Turkish government, while promoting the freedom of the speech and expression on social media, is also treating social media as an enemy in a way.
That started with the Gezi protests, and I remember him calling Twitter as a menace. So that's how it started. And that time globally, it was, we saw the demonization of big tech. And they kind of turned into demons, but it's like, that's a part of a separate discussion. So yeah, we saw some very unfortunate consequences, like financially. The most tragic one was the Twitter throttling of bandwidth for 12 hours, right after the 2023 earthquakes in Turkey that affected 10 big cities on the southeast, which cost, I don't know, over tens of thousands of lives. And this was like a very thin window, and of course a lot of people were criticizing how the government is handling this, which was very poorly. And people were organizing on Twitter, and even people under the ruins who still had some battery left on their phones were trying to reach out to the save and rescue operation teams. So this was just horrible. I don't know how many lives it cost. So that's the most severe consequence. And then for financial consequences, again, Instagram was blocked in 2024 for a couple of days, I think 3 days. And because of refusal to block some of the opposition accounts. And so that for lots of like influencers and small business owners who were selling their stuff online on Instagram shop, they were badly affected. And after the arrest of the Istanbul mayor, of course, we saw again a nationwide throttling of X, YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp, TikTok for 21 hours. And then Imamoglu's, the mayor's Twitter X account was blocked. And his image and his voice was banned, which has no legal ground whatsoever. But it was. That's the first time I'm hearing such a thing. It's like, so no one can use their, because people change their profile pics on social media accounts, and even some of them were prosecuted. And right now, I think we have over 400 plus journalists and activist accounts being blocked in this year. And I would like to start with a funny one. So back in 2018, we had, again, another economic crisis. And some commentators on social media, some of them were academics, some of them were journalists, so they forecasted Turkish lira would reach, the US dollar exchange rate would reach 10 liras. And prosecution started for 38 of these social media users. By the end of the year, it was 11. And believe it or not, this case went on until 2022, so only that they were dismissed. And now, if you make a wild guess, it's 42. So yeah, it's going up and up. So it's all sides of consequences on so many levels of and this affects our daily life.
Thank you. Speaking of consequences, Milica, since everything started, like the things are not so bad, because after when it comes to Serbia and the use of surveillance technologies, because Serbian government has lost right to use the licenses to some of the spyware procured because of the abuses, if I remember correctly.
They got it back.
They got it back?
Yes.
How long that lasted?
Well, the Celebrite, after the huge spyware spectacle, the Celebrite company announced that they took the license back from Serbian authorities because the Celebrite is only selling to authorities to use this within their mandate. So after they got proof that it's being misused, they told, okay, we are considering taking the license back. And that's the news that we got from Birn and from Radio Free Europe. And we didn't know what happened for quite some time, maybe a month, but then I think Radio Free Europe informed us that they got the license back, and actually that the software was kind of altered in a way, and that they had instructed Serbian authorities that they can't leave a trace of using this. So what we learned from journalists is that authorities, when they use Celebrite to unlock the phones, to take everything out, they break the phone, so there is no evidence. So that's all I know so far.
Thank you. So it is bad. I stand corrected. Speaking of surveillance technologies and everything, I'm going to give an example of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Recently, we had a president of the state court, state-level court, and former director of the state intelligence agency in Bosnia, both arrested on charges of illegally wiretapping and surveilling duty prosecutors and judges. That case is still ongoing, but as far as we could understand is that they started monitoring the numbers of the duty prosecutors that were after 5 o'clock and during the night, who have to be available 24/7, that they were monitoring those numbers in order to manipulate who is going to get what case. Another thing which is currently being investigated in Bosnia is the case of IMSI, or IMSI catchers. So it's a device that acts as a reception tower, and we had the state protection agency, which is the police agency in Bosnia that has the authority in the whole country. They raided the premises of the federal police administration in search of evidence who and when used those IMSI catchers to monitor some 300 citizens in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So, and speaking of secret services, another interesting case came from Montenegro a few years back with a website called Udar, which turned out to be controlled by the intelligence agency.
Yes. So, when listening, I'm going to open this part of the censor because it's very, very funny. Yesterday's when Maggie presented the entire digital rights annual report, I commented, Sara was next to me, I was like, what a time to be alive. So, what a time to be alive. Let's circle back to the ancient history of 5 years ago, a bit more, of 2020 in Montenegro, August, a very hot summer, and a very important one for our political context. So after a bit more than 30 years of the former regime's not rule is not a strong word enough to explain what was good. and more. The 2020 parliamentary elections were very important ones, and the ones where we finally changed the government in Montenegro, which was long overdue. The change in general is a concept, and that is something that I, during my life as an adult, as a kid, and I experienced for the first time. And alongside with that, before the parliamentary elections, came the Udar being the attack, directly translated from Serbian. So Udar was the title of the portal that was made without any. It did not cross transparency as a concept. It never knew transparency as such. I will try to make this shorter. I'm getting into being very wide in explaining this. So basically, the UDAR was created and targeting political opponents of the former regimes, clerks of the our Orthodox Church, many of politicians from the opposition, back then, opposition political parties, and they were directly targeted. And what we actually found out that they were strongly linked to ANB, to Agency for National Security of Montenegro, and those were some of the things where you once again question in which Montenegro you live in, and what is the assumed functions of the institutions and what are the actual functions of them. So after the elections, everything it never existed. This is why I said at the beginning, we will go to the ancient history, to the 2020, because this is a personal impression, but I think we have a very, very short memory. And that is something that is also, on the other hand, very problematic, because as we are sitting here and discussing the digital rights in the digital space and how the digital space has consequences in real life, an example that should show us how fast and how important this sphere is for how long we form the strategies in this sphere. We used to have 10 years long strategies. Imagine you have a 10-year long strategy in AI. It's impossible. We're not even going for 5, we're going to 3 years in strategizing in these fields, because we do not know. And that uncertainty, alongside with extremely short memory, is something that is quite important to emphasize in these contexts. And I think for the developmental purposes, we need to be more on board on what are the pillars on which we stand on and what are the assumed rule of law and assumed functions of the institutions. And it's a rocking boat with every night in my dreams. You know the song. You can title the boat.
Thank you. So we are coming to an end. If anybody has questions, please have questions. It's your time now. Anybody? Yeah. There's a microphone coming too.
Thank you. I just have a question to our colleague from Turkey. We've heard reports in the digital rights community about the government is planning to or has already introduced certain legal changes that would require that the civil society organizations register on a certain platform in order to hold online meetings. Is that not true, or?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's in the bylaw linked to the law of associations. So as of a couple of years back now, before that, Turkish associations were not able to meet online, legally, or General Assembly meetings. So a couple of years back, they enabled this, but still they had to authorize a company. We had the same thing for under the commercial code for companies established in Turkey to make their own meetings. This was again, I think they authorized three companies. So now only one company, as far as I'm concerned, because we are also dealing with this association law stuff in general. And this year, you don't actually register, but in order to meet online and that meeting to be legally recognizable, then you can only have the meeting via that particular company authorized by the government. And usually these authorized government companies are assumed to be linked to the government to a certain extent. I mean, I don't have legal proof, but yeah, I'll make a wild guess.
We have another one?
Yes, hi. So listening to all this, it sounds really horrific, right? And I was just wondering what, this might be the most depressive question ever. Like, why do you do the things you do? Like, what's the payoff? Where do you see improvements that are the result of, let's say, your work or the work of your community or the work of your colleagues? And why don't you just, I don't know, pack it in and move to, Slovenia, for example? No, but I'm really wondering, like, because you make it sound very, so it's impossible to establish like legal norms. When you establish them, they're full of these surveillance black holes. They're poorly executed. There's no supervision of these norms, or there's no supervision of the execution of these norms, and basically, you're in this really messed up simulation game. So what do you see as a payoff?
I'm going to give this hot potato to you, ladies.
It's a very hot potato, so I'm going to hold it like this. I had the privilege of living for a month in Ljubljana, and I'm going to answer to you with the question, is this an invitation? Because I'd love to. On the other hand, it's like work. There was a while back where I chose what I want to do in life. It was human rights. It was the most important decision. So far, I'm not married, but like so far, the most important decision I made. It was to choose what I want to do in life, and it was to fight for the human rights and freedoms, and to go where my heart leads me. So I would go against myself then to deal with this. Back in the day, it seems like a great mission. Until the Pandora box opened and you find out it's a very depressing field and a very sad one. But what keeps me running from a humanitarian field, and that is my actual job, the HELP is an international humanitarian organization, is knowing that I'm on the right side and I'm helping to make changes in different areas, different aspects of this. So yeah, there's like the tiny, you see like right now, tiny little bit of lightness in this. Thank you, God Almighty.
Maybe I can share. Thank you for the question. So the situation is not good, but it's not boring to live in a country like this. You asked why don't we move? If we look what's going on in democratic pillars like EU and USA now, I think we are running out of places to hide. So I think the only choice we have is to give up or to try to do whatever we can to fix our own backyard. So that's what we are trying to do.
Yeah, I'd like to, being on the right side is good. And again, we're not in isolation, I would say. It's like 20 years ago, I was feeling very bad, like sitting in between lots of these like Western democracies. And now I hate to break the news, but I don't know. It's like don't feel so safe in Slovenia. Although I don't mind a house in Piran, for example. I said that would be cool. But also, I think what we're trying to do here is, I'm not going to deny things are moving in a bad direction, but I think it's the global trend that we're seeing all around the world. But I think what we're trying to do is at least we're slowing down this going downhill, creating a support system for those in need. At least a little, even if you can reach out to one single person who is trying to do something good, I think that matters. And in some cases, even in Turkey, it's like the government steps back if you're insistent enough. So I don't see the point of like throwing the towel and everything. Yeah, I'm a lawyer, I have a law firm on the side that I might easily focus on that, but I don't know. This is a bug that I cannot get rid of and also enjoy.
Yeah, I'm also going to go for the answer that this topic is actually never boring, and besides I come from a country where we have an AI minister, which is expecting 83 more AI virtual assistants, and in the meantime the deputy prime minister is facing prosecution charges on a major corruption scandal, and the mayor of Tirana is also in jail for a major corruption issue as well. So you know the expression, may we live in interesting times, I think this is it. We are living in the interesting times and we get to be the watchdogs, and what greater privilege is there?
And I want to thank you for your question because it was a great, Orhan has a question.
I just want to add something to that if that's possible.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you. I had this friend who was born in Colombia. His parents moved to Venezuela in order to escape from the regime there. Then they moved to the United States, right? Now he's trying to come to the EU. So there is nowhere to escape. I mean, I used to believe also that, I mean, oh, if things go bad in Turkey, why would I live here? Where am I going to go? I'm also a Bulgarian citizen. We have a house in the village, but I don't know any Bulgarian. I'm Turkish, I speak Turkish, I have been raised in there. Wherever you are raised, wherever you feel your roots are, that's the place. I mean, we are not the bravest people on earth, but why would we? We are the majority, and we have done nothing wrong. It's not to be a hero, just to trying to live our lives. And there is seriously no place to go. Where am I going to go? Italy? For example, Serbia. I mean, I don't know which place will become more authoritarian than today. And at least, I mean, it's better to be with your own people around. I mean, of course, if, like, I don't want a crystal night or something, I would escape. I'm not that kind of a brave person, but, I mean, there are not that many places to run anyway, so.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your question again, because this was a great closing remarks question, and I don't have to ask one. I will, however, once again remind you who my panelists were today: Irina Stamatović, Irina Stamatović from Montenegro, Ceren Unal from Turkey, Milica Tošić from Serbia, and Sara Kelmendi from Albania. And now it's time for lunch. Have a good meal, topofta mir, prijatno, and see you later.